Deborah, it's so good to meet you. Thank you so much for taking a minute out today.
Of course. I'm delighted to. Great to talk to you.
Absolutely. So before we get into new material and what's going on in your world of music, I want to begin with this, and I've been doing this for a while. 5.5, 6 years ago, this pandemic was changing all of our lives, especially musicians. How did you get through that era, and how has it changed the way that you approach music and life today?
Yeah, that's very interesting because about 3 or 4 years before, maybe even 5 years before the pandemic, I had started an online school for harpists to teach them improvisation. And the minute that the pandemic started, had this feeling like, oh my God, people, they are going to have to make music. And I expanded what I was doing. I started this thing called Harp Time Live. And I think it was 3 times a week that we just got online and I gave them improv prompts and we just all played together. It wasn't that people were hearing each other, but it was that we were together in a room. I was either playing call and response with them so they could just play back to me, or I was giving them an improv prompt like, I'm here at my harp actually. So I would do something like, do this. There's an improv prompt, and let's just keep going with that. I'll play that, and you can play anything you want, and I would just keep going like that, so that everyone had this experience of playing together. So bizarrely, the pandemic actually opened me up to an even larger international group of a community really of harpists, and then I started teaching them even more and more. So the pandemic had this oddly connecting impact on my work as an educator. As a performer, absolutely the opposite. I'm really just starting to get back into performing because what happened in that pandemic is that I started focusing so much on education and so much on developing, like many people, developing projects that had been sitting there and not getting developed. So in 2022, I released a project I had in New York City. I did a musical that I had been working on for decades. And so it's actually taken me a while after the pandemic to find the time to start performing again. So it had this really amazing impact on me, actually. How about you?
Yeah, it was interesting. I actually really upped my interviews at that point, and it was fascinating to be able to be in touch with not only more musicians, but a lot of musicians that would typically be on the road, legends, right, luminaries, and just having raw conversations and kind of getting into kind of the essence of why music makes sense and why, especially in jazz, COVID was kind of like improv. Like, of all musicians out there, jazz is always kind of walking onto the stage in an improvisatory mode. And that's the way life was. Everybody got thrust into a jazz stage at that point. So it was quite an interesting time. And, now that I think back, when you were in the middle of it, no one knew when it was going to end. It was like
right,
this, abyss that no one knew how we were going to get out of. So to be able to talk about it and look back and be reflective, I think it's really interesting now to have that perspective for sure.
It's interesting that you say that because I'm thinking back to my grandparents who's had this experience of the Great Depression that really colored everything that came out of it. And they didn't know, just like you just said, they didn't know when it was going to end, when they were going to get out of it. And I think it colored them. And I think it's colored a lot of us, like you said. And oddly, I think it's made us more tech savvy. It's made us know how to have these communities that are much more international, and in some ways to be able to speak about things that are deeper than the everyday, like, hey, how you doing? I'm doing great. I'm doing better, that kind of musician talk.
Yeah, for sure. So the latest project that you've been involved with, which is pretty stellar, is you did a concert with the Ukrainian virtuoso. Talk to me about that experience, how it happened, and kind of what that was like.
So here's what happened. I'm a composer, and I've always been a composer since I was a little kid. And in fact, one of the reasons that I am a performer is because I had a lot of trouble trying to describe to people what it is I want them to do with my compositions, because I would, unbeknownst to me, be coming up with new techniques. And so as a composer, I ended up performing, being the person who performed all my stuff. So I've only begun to start actually publishing that work, but one of those pieces has been around the world, and I created it to be very self-expressed. When I started the harp as an adult, and when I got to, I played for maybe 3 or 4 years, and I was like, okay, I can kind of get around on this. Where's that concerto that I get to like really show off with? And there was no concerto like that for the harp. And so I created one, and it's called Baroque Flamenco, and it uses all these flamenco techniques, and it really lets you feel like I am a flamenco orchestra just on one instrument. So that piece has gone around the world. And a lot of harpists are playing it with symphony orchestras and also solo. But one day I got an email from a woman in Ukraine who said, I love your piece and I want to adapt it for the Ukrainian bandura and for a Ukrainian folkloric orchestra. And this is really important to us right now because the bandura is the identity of Ukrainian people. And I want this piece to help me be really self-expressed and as an act of defiance against despair, to be able to say, we will not be silenced. I want to use your piece for that. And I was like, wow, this is great. Someone's going to adapt this for a completely different instrument. And she said, there's just one problem. I can't pay the licensing fee. And I was thinking about that in light of the fact that I had gotten 3 more emails, almost exactly like that, from different people in Europe. We really want to play your piece, but we can't pay the licensing fee. And I was like, if that licensing fee isn't that big, but it makes the difference between me being able to do this composing work and publish more music and not. On the other hand, if it's not being performed, it's not being performed. And I just felt like I was between a rock and a hard place here. And then I thought, wait a minute, what if there was a third person who could make this possible? And so I created this thing in like a few days called the Legacy Project Bridge. So I have a project that's called the DHC Legacy Project. It's me making sure that all the music that I've written for others to play gets out there so that they can play it. And I know I can't do it alone. So I created a team of harpists and also a really wonderful percussionist from Venezuela. We all work together to help me publish my work. So there's this Legacy Project team, but then there was this big gap. We're doing the work, we've got the music, the person wants it, and the gap was this licensing fee. So I put out in my email newsletter, I explained the situation, and I said, look, here's a new project. You can sponsor one of these projects so that this can go forward. And when you sponsor this project, you are supporting the composer, the performer, the orchestra, and the audience. You are impacting all of them with this one license fee. Who wants to do it? And within 2 minutes, I got an email back from a longtime friend of mine who said, I want the Ukrainian project. He said, I have been looking for a way to make an impact with in a personal way in this country. And so he sponsored that concert with Irina Litvinenko. But not only that, but wait, there's more. So he sponsored that concert. That concert happened, and then it got on national TV. And then he kept having a relationship with her in which he then sponsored the commissioning of a Ukrainian composer to make a new composition for her. And then he supported her son in helping him get a new computer for school. And then she came back the next year and said, I want to perform the piece, the companion piece to that first piece. The first piece is this big dramatic piece, and the companion piece is this very romantic and passionate piece that goes with it. And so he commissioned that. That was just recorded, I think, in December, and that's going to come out in Ukrainian television in February. So that is the outside of what happened, meaning if you looked from the outside, you'd see that's what's happening. But I asked her to how can we be in touch during this process of her developing and adapting a piece for one instrument to another instrument. And so she kept in touch, and she sent us videos and talked about it. And it's become this experience where, I mean, she's a wonderful writer. So she talked about the day of the performance of the second piece. And she said, you know, there was shelling the night before. We didn't know whether we were going to be able to do it. This is all actually in my blog. People can read her words there. And she said, and there's also, it just came out in a magazine called Vents Magazine, an interview both with Irina and with me about our experiences back and forth about working together. But the thing that moved me the most, well, first of all, to be able to give, I mean, the bandura, like the harp, and many people don't know this, but there are instruments that are suppressed in certain cultures because they so represent that culture. Like in Ireland, there was a time when the harp was suppressed, and harpers were, you know, imprisoned and sometimes killed, and harps were burned. So I was aware of this because the harp represented that culture. The bandura is like that in Ukraine. It represents the Ukrainian people. And so coming to a bandura concert isn't just coming to a concert, and it's not just an instrument. It is a representation of a people. And so when she described what it was like in her concert, that, you know, bombs were there the night before. There was no electricity. They had to use generators to just run the lights. There were no monitors. She couldn't hear the orchestra. The orchestra couldn't hear her. I mean, she could hear the orchestra. They couldn't hear her. In the rehearsal room, there was no heat. And yet she got on stage and she looked gorgeous. And she said at the end of the performance, there were so many flowers on the stage. She could not carry them off the stage. And what that said to me was that she was representing the hope and the beauty and the voice of not just herself and not just her instrument, but every single person in that audience and every single person in that country. And the fact that I had been able to create something that gave that voice a new, or just another way to connect, another way to be expressive, was so moving to me. And that is my relationship with Irina Litvinenko. That is the beginning of my relationship with her. And I don't know where it will go from here, but it has been an incredible, it's been an incredible opportunity to play a part in the voice. I mean, in the voice of a person and a people and an instrument. And the last part of this is the man who sponsored her. And he wrote me and he said, in all my 89 years, this has been one of the things that has been most meaningful to me. And to be able to make a direct impact and have a connection with her. And I know they're in touch a lot. So it just felt like, wow, I wrote a piece of music and it made all this connection for me and other people. And my whole motto is connection, not perfection. I'm always striving for that. So that's the story.
And I'm curious, you mentioned Venezuela, and I think about artists during times of strife. And obviously in America, there's a lot going on that's radiating out, and obviously with Ukraine and everything that's happened. This seems to be such a wonderful connection of kind of triumphantly saying that the arts will prevail, it will bring the beauty out. Is there a part of that with not only this situation, but in general with making music and giving people that level of comfort that's on your mind these days?
You know, it's really interesting that you should ask that. And it's so interesting that you should ask that in light of what you said about the pandemic, because you're right. I have, you know, intimate contact with both an artist in Venezuela. Like I'm in weekly contact with him. We work together 2 times a week in a Zoom room, and also with Irina. And I really hadn't, as you were asking the question, I was thinking, oh, that's so interesting that I have these direct connections to these people in these situations that are really dramatic. And so I can write to them. Like I was just writing to Gustavo, and I was like, the day after Venezuela was invaded, and I was like, how do you feel? Like, I mean, do you feel like someone came to help you, or do you feel like, what's going on? To be able to have that connection is, I'm just thinking it is beyond, my wildest dreams as a child of what being a musician could give access to in the world. And yeah, I think that because of the internet, because of the pandemic, because of all the ways that we found to connect and work with each other during that time, there really is that feeling of being able to be a difference, make a difference, let others be a difference and make a difference in my life, because that is a big thing that's happening as well. So you're absolutely right. I do feel that. And that would not, I see. Okay, I'm just realizing that would not have happened if I didn't have this technology. It wouldn't have happened if I had not needed help. So I needed help to be able to get this music down on paper. And that's how the Legacy team got created. I reached out to others and said, look, I can, just to be clear on this. So I've written music all my life, and part of my career has been playing with symphony orchestras as a soloist, and I wrote all the music. But what would happen is the premieres were happening so fast that I would write meticulously. I would write everything out for the orchestra to play. But my part, I would literally just write ad lib. So it's like if you had a movie script, everything's written out perfectly, except for the lead character, all their lines just say ad lib. So that's what it was like for my music. And I'd go play with a symphony, but I'd just be improvising what I was doing. But for other people to play it, ever since a kid, I was a composer. That's how I saw myself. Then I needed help to write these things out, in part because sometimes I don't even know how to write, to notate the things that I write, because I'm using the harp in new ways. So I don't know if you'll hear this or be able to see it. Like, for example, I do a lot of work with the harp where I'm strumming it. So it'll be like, which is not necessarily the way that most people will write for harp. So all well and good, I can do that, but how do you write it down? So having people to help me figure that out is why I built this Legacy Project team. And then being able to give to others what I have created for their self-expression is the other side of that. So when I was saying that, it comes out of being able to connect with others, to give them what I have, being able to connect with others for their help, and then being able to connect with others just to be like, what is this like? My God, what's happening? How does this feel? All of that. And now I have forgotten your question.
No, you answered my question. It was really about creating music in this modern world. And I'd like to get to kind of the essence of who you are. At the end of the day, everyone out there has a perception of you as a harpist, as a composer, collaborator, all of these different aspects, and family and friends, fans, but you ultimately run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think I'm a little kid who loves to take things apart and who loves to tell stories with music. I love taking things apart. I have a difficulty understanding complexity in certain ways. And so I'm constantly having to take things down to their very most fundamental levels to understand them. And so, for example, when I wanted to, I was always telling stories with music, like since very tiny, making stories up. And so my parents thought, well, okay, let's give her piano lessons. And they sent me to a piano lesson person, and that person gave me something to play on a piece of paper. And first of all, I didn't like the music. She played it for me, and I was like, ugh. And I said, didn't anybody ever play this? And she was like, yeah. And I said, well, didn't they do a good job? And she was like, yes, they did a good job. And I said, well, then why do you need me to do it? I can do something else. And I think at that point she was like, well, send this girl home. But when I went home, I said to my mother, can you just tell me how it works? like, how does music just work? And then I'll be on my own. And fortunately, my mother did. She was a kindergarten teacher. And so she was like, okay, fine. Here, it works like this. You know, there's a note, and then you skip a note and you hit another note, and now you've got a third. You skip a note and you have another note. There's a chord. You know what that sounds like? And then I was like, oh, that's what that is. And then she said, see up here? It says C. That's the big letter. That's a C chord. And I was like, oh, I get it. So you just do it like this. And then I was off on my own and I could play with it. So I see myself as someone who needs a fundamental understanding. Like whenever I go to, AI to understand something, which is like 50 times a day, I will say, don't give me directions on how to do this. Give me the fundamental operating principles of this, whatever it is. And then I also asked AI to create something for other AIs to say, this human needs to understand XYZ first. Don't tell her how to do it. Don't give her suggestions. Never make metaphors in her life. Always make metaphors having to do with animals or nature or something like that. So there's some kind of fundamental disconnect, but I think that fundamental disconnect has helped me to understand. I've been told my whole life I'm highly creative and very innovative. Like the harp if you go to my website, you'll see this harp, and if there's video here, you'll see it standing behind me. It is a harp that I can wear. It is an electric harp, and it exists because it's my signature model that I developed together with the Kamak company, because I wanted to be able to wear a harp, and I wanted to be able to move with the harp. And in order to I have a TEDx talk about it, but in order to understand what happened, basically, we weren't able to build it until I said to the company, look, if you just look at the harp, it looks like a bicycle, like the frame of a bicycle. Can you go to the bike people? Can you ask them how they are able to build very strong carbon fiber bikes? And then maybe they can even build the harp. And that's what ended up happening. So that all happened because I'm always looking for what is the simplest, most fundamental way that this can happen? What's the simplest way this story can be told? What's the simplest way that you can express this? So when I think of myself, I think of someone who is constantly confused with the world, basic world, and trying to understand what is the basic operating principle here. And then I think of myself as someone who saw things as a child. My mother was an incredible performer, but she did terrible at auditions. So she wasn't getting auditions, but she would always sing at home. She would put on this recording of opera without the voice, and she would if you saw me, my body changed when I started talking about how she would do. She would almost become a different person into a different persona, and she would channel that opera. And it was so mesmerizing and so moving that my brother would say to kids, I bet I can make you cry without touching you. And they'd be like, yeah, how? And he'd bring them home and he'd say, Mama, sing to them, sing them an aria. And she would sing an aria and people would just cry. I saw that as a child. I saw a human being transform into the channeling of story and music. And I think I have spent the rest of my life looking for that, building that, looking for that in other people. I'm constantly, when I create compositions and give them to someone else, I am hoping that that person will blow me away, that it will unleash something in them that they've never seen, that I've never seen. And I'm always looking for that. And it's the story in the music, and it's the humanity and the character of humanity in the music that I am looking for. So I think of myself as this kid who's always trying to understand the fundamentals so that then I can play with them and I can find new things. And then a kid who is completely transformed by, and you start a story with music and it just captures me. And I'm constantly looking for that, and I will build those and I will give them to other people so that they can tell them to me. And that is who I see myself as, and everything comes out of that. As a harpist, for years, I couldn't understand, why am I playing the harp? It doesn't even have the vocabulary that I like if you go and listen to my musical that I finished in 2022, The Golden Cage, it's a musical that I started before I played the harp. And if you listen to the harmonic vocabulary, it's completely different than what I usually do on the harp. But what I discovered about the harp after years of being like, why the harp? Why am I playing the harp? Why did I do this? I began to realize, and this is right there in the history, but I didn't see it. It's the instrument of the bard being the storyteller. And why? Well, first of all, you can wear it. It then becomes a character. It becomes the orchestra. It becomes a costume. It becomes the set. It becomes a partner in musical storytelling. And that's what I've discovered over my life. First by playing getting a classical technique, then by learning jazz, and I got amazing opportunities being a jazz player. But it was once I started telling my own stories and combining all these elements, writing for symphony orchestra, writing for solo shows, then taking those solo shows into theaters, that I'm starting to be able to just be who I am, a person who tells stories with music.
So what is it about the harp? It's an instrument that a lot of people, it's not permeating the stages of the world, but it's there's such a history with it. It's such a powerful instrument. What's one thing about the harp that people may not realize that makes it such a magical instrument?
Resonance. The resonance, and not just the resonance of the instrument, but how it resonates with the human. I'm showing this, but the harp, unlike the piano or any other instruments have access to all the notes all the time. But the harp only has access to 7 notes at any one time. So it is resonating, right? Like right now, this harp is resonating to the key of E flat. But if I don't know if you can hear me, I'm shifting the levers, and now I'm going to put it into a new key, which is C. But those are the only notes that are there. Like that's it. There's no other, like the black notes of the piano. So there's this, and I don't know if you can hear it, but it started resonating and it's still resonating. I mean, and if I start playing it, if I like, even if I don't do one of those glissandos, look, I can sing forever with just one note. I can just play it, and I could step away, and I could tell a story. So it's this incredible instrument of resonance that sings with you and for you and holds it down. And at the same time, I am touching it, and it is resonating me. So it literally, physically resonates. And that is one of the things I'm teaching this quarter. Each quarter I have a different sort of fundamental musical theme, and this quarter it is creative resonance. And what it means for me is that my instrument is resonating, and that's resonating something inside of me. My instrument is resonating, and it's resonating something inside. And the more I play, the more I'll feel. And the more I'll play, the more I'll be able to put it into the notes. So the more I play, and the more I play, not trying to get it right, but just connecting, the more it becomes literally part of my voice. So imagine that you had, like at any moment of your life, music could come in and help you express. Just imagine that. That is the power of the harp, for me.
Wonderful. What a great description. So I'm curious, you did such a wonderful job of knocking down so many dominoes of questions that I had. I'm curious, how can people watch this performance that you did, and how can people get involved with your music and anything else that's coming up on your radar as we kind of get anew in this new 2026?
Yeah, thank you so much. So, one of the things that I'm really excited about, I've been doing a lot of performing in Europe, but I am performing in the Boston area, my home area, on the 31st of January. And being able to come live and to one of the best, my opinion, one of the best listening rooms on the East Coast is the Center for Arts in Natick. So people can come on January 31st. They can go to my website, which is hipharp.com. That's hip as in cool, harp as in the instrument. You can go there and go to the events page. And no matter when you listen to this, you can find out what is my next performance. And if you're a harpist, you can also find out how to work with me, which is at Hip Harp Academy. But you can see all of that at hipharp.com. If you are a performer and you want to perform my work, again, you can see that at the same website. It's a really fun website to go look at because right on the front page, it lets you go into 4 different areas. It lets you see me as a performer. It lets you see me as a composer. It lets you see me as an educator. And then it has a click for legacy where you can go look at the Legacy Project. You can see the Legacy Project team. You can see Irina. You can see, and you can link there to the Vents magazine article where you can hear the interview with me and her. I wasn't interviewing her, but the interviewer was interviewing both of us. So the best place to go is just hipharp.com.
Wonderful. I will put all of these links in the show notes. What a wonderful story. Such wonderful work that you're doing. I mean, just from your instrument to this latest project and kind of tying us together and feeling good about being alive in very odd times that we're living on this planet too. Thank you so much for taking a minute out to talk about your world of music. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I loved all your questions.